Alright, so normally all my videos are about video games, but I also think anime is pretty neat too, so today I decided to make a video about my new favorite anime of all time, JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, and why I prefer it over my previous favorite, Hunter x Hunter, as well as some other heavy hitters like Dragon Ball. So sit back in your Uncle Lonnie's favorite chair, pour yourself a tall glass of bull milk, press the subscribe button if you haven't already, and allow me, the world's smelliest former baby, Cameron all one word, to tell you why you need to watch JoJo's Bizarre Adventure if you like anime, all while avoiding as many remote details as possible that could be considered spoilers. Alright, so for the longest time, I've always heard about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure here and there, and even though I didn't watch it right away, I never forgot about the name, because after all, with a title like JoJo's Bizarre Adventure, how the frig could I have? I mean, who's this JoJo, and what's so bizarre about his or her particular adventure? After all, pretty much any anime is bizarre to some extent, so I thought this was a pretty bold claim to make, but then for whatever reason, I decided to watch a few episodes out of curiosity, because surely a show this popular must be good, right? Well, after just 2 episodes, I can confidently say that I thought the show was alright, and then I just kind of forgot about it. But then like 3 months later, I decided to keep watching at least until I saw the conclusion of the first story arc, because even if I hate something, I've usually got to get to a decent stopping point before I can move on with my life. And while the final climactic battle didn't necessarily hook me, the events that followed it blew my mind. Again, I'll try to spare as many details as possible to avoid spoilers, but basically the story skips 50 years ahead of time and completely focuses on a brand new protagonist, Joseph Joestar, aka Jojo, who's the grandson of the first protagonist, Jonathan Joestar, aka Jojo, which is when I realized that the Jojo from the title wasn't one character, but rather a series of characters that change with every story arc, and this is one of the main things I love about this series. I mean, based on all the promotional material I've ever seen, I've always thought this guy right here was the one and only Jojo, so I was pretty confused when the story was set in the late 1800s with this English gentleman Jonathan being the Jojo I'd heard so much about. I mean, I realized that the show must take place in Japan at some point, so I just kind of figured that since the show's so bizarre that there'd be some kind of time-traveling mechanics or something like that, but the idea of changing the main character in each part based on the descendants of the original really fascinated me. I mean, even though I originally planned on stopping after the first part, I was intrigued enough by Jonathan's marriage, baby, and subsequent time skip that I just had to see how they followed things up, so I checked the first episode of the second arc out, and once I saw what the second JoJo was all about, I was completely hooked. Jonathan's unfairly considered to be a boring character by a lot of fans of the series, and while I wouldn't necessarily go that far, he's certainly my least favorite JoJo, mainly because he's more or less a straight-up white-meat babyface hero. I mean, he's a young and tall English gentleman from the late 1800s in peak physical condition who stands for justice by fighting fairly with honor against vampires and zombies using his ripple breathing technique that allows energy similar to sunlight flow through his body and power him up. But while the second JoJo, Joseph Joestar, inherited these exact same abilities, he was the exact opposite of his grandfather as far as personality is concerned. You see, Joseph was raised in England, but by the time he's 18 in the second part, he lives in New York City in the year 1938, and he's hilarious, badass, and highly mischievous. Unlike his grandfather, he'll shamelessly win fights by any means necessary, even if he has to fight dirty, and as tough and as stubborn as he is, he won't hesitate to use the infamous Joestar family technique if he has to, which is basically just him running away. I mean, they introduce him using his inherited powers to beat 2 racist cops up, and while Jonathan would have done the same thing, he clearly wouldn't have made the same wisecracks or made this as entertaining as Joseph did. And this opening scene was clearly done on purpose to establish that this new hero was going to be a lot less predictable and one-dimensional as the previous one.
Surely the era of the superhero who urged you to say your prayers and take your vitamins is definitely passé.
At the end of the day, everyone has their favorite JoJo, so if there's ever one in particular you don't like as much as a previous hero, then just know that you won't be stuck with them forever, and if you don't want your favorite JoJo to leave, then at least you'll have the peace of mind in knowing that they're never going to overstay their welcome or become boring. But not only do we get new JoJos as the series progresses, but obviously due to the time skips, usually only like 5% of the old characters return, and sometimes nobody at all even. And the best part about that is that it basically means that anybody and everybody can die at any time, including the JoJos, which is kind of a spoiler, but since I won't say which ones die, you'll at least take every battle completely seriously if you ever watch the series. I mean, sometimes when characters in JoJo die, they are resuscitated shortly after and end up living, but even then, it doesn't work out more often than it does. So when a character's dying but not quite dead yet, the sense of urgency is a lot higher here than in any other anime I've ever seen. Because all that comfort you get from other animes when you realize that deep down you know certain characters aren't gonna die just doesn't exist in JoJo. Out of all the bizarre things that happen in this series, and trust me, there's a lot of bizarre things going on here, coming back to life is one of the few things that are off the table. Again, I'm not going to go into too many details on all the JoJo since it'll take way too long to do, and honestly, just knowing some of their origins is going to spoil quite a bit for you. But I will say that they're all great and completely different from each other, and even beyond the main protagonist, the rest of the characters are all extraordinarily memorable in every part, regardless of whether they're heroes or villains. Sometimes they're badasses with hearts of gold, sometimes they're complete sweethearts, and sometimes they're pure scum-of-the-earth evil. And the main reason why the characters in the series are so interesting is because of a major shift that takes place in the third part regarding the supernatural abilities. This is a development that I can't avoid talking about, but the ripple breathing technique that was established in the first two parts is pretty much thrown in the trash right off the bat in part 3 in favor of the new abilities that revolve around stands. Stands are basically ghosts that people can summon from their bodies that all have unique abilities with their own strengths and weaknesses, although the stat chart never really makes any sense, so just ignore these when you see them. The only thing that can hurt a stand is another stand, but any damage a stand receives is reflected back to the user, and if you can defeat the user, then his or her stand will disappear, except for a few rare occasions anyway. To be honest, I friggin' hated stands at first because of how drastically different they were from the previously established abilities, and there were also a few other things I didn't like about Part 3 at first either. Yet again, to avoid spoilers, I'm not gonna go into too much detail on why I initially resisted Part 3, but by the end of the story, I was completely convinced that stands were absolutely the way to go. And the main reason for that's because while some characters could develop new stand abilities on rare occasions under special circumstances, they were more or less as powerful as they'd ever be right off the bat. And as much as I loved characters becoming way stronger after training in Dragon Ball, it kinda backed that series into a corner, because the stronger the main characters became, all the newer threats kept becoming less and less believable. Or, at least in my opinion, anyway. I mean, after all, Master Roshi could blow the friggin' moon up in the beginning of the series, and it's kinda weird how Miss Blast don't blow planets up later on, or how Goku in 17 can't just instantly knock a normal human being with a hostage out faster than he could pull his trigger. So when you look at how strong the characters in Jojo were becoming by the end of the second part with the original Ripple abilities, then you'll realize that it was only a matter of time before Jojo fell into the same trap as well had the series not been shifted to stands. Plus, not only do stands not being centered around power or becoming stronger keep the series from jumping the shark as far as threats are concerned, but since you can't really train to make your stands any stronger anyway, then your characters aren't limited to being dedicated martial artists who work their absolute hardest just to have even the slightest advantages in battle. And the beauty to this is that it allows characters to be far more interesting and have a lot more variety in their personalities. I mean, stand users in Jojo could be badass, don't get me wrong, but they could also be lazy, fat, old, babies, dogs, cats, or even friggin' plankton. JoJo's Bizarre Adventure is not necessarily always about raising the stakes as high as possible with each part, it's just about keeping the story interesting. So while some of the villains do in fact want to take over the world like in most other animes, others have more simple motives like wanting to live peaceful lives with a little bit of serial killing on the side. And seeing as how pretty much anything can have a stand, and that most stands are more or less just as capable in combat as others, you never find yourself questioning why even the most badass characters who've beaten massive global threats could have a 2-on-1 advantage in their favor against a rat and still get their asses kicked. And that's because battles in Jojo are never about who's stronger or who trains harder, they're always about strategy and having the right ability for specific situations. I mean, even though there's not one character in JoJo's Bizarre Adventure who could ever even come close to being as strong as Krillin, there's multiple stand users who could still beat him, or even Goku at full power in a fight under the right circumstances. But even though some stands are obviously better than others, there's always something interesting about them, and the amount of creativity and variety in the different types of stands means that battles are always interesting and unpredictable. Stand abilities range from things like being able to restore stuff, create life, turn things into zippers, invade dreams, turn living things into manga, stopping time, skipping time, or even sometimes just punching things really hard. In fact, some stands are actually multiple stands that are referred to as colony stands, which are basically groups of mini-ghosts that could guide bullets to hit targets with pinpoint accuracy and extra power, or even just collect coins and stamps around the town. With all that being said, though, I barely even scratched the surface on what stands can do, mainly because I don't want to spoil anything, but also because it'd take way too long to cover them all. But to sum it all up, though, pretty much anything can happen in a stand battle, as opposed to Dragon Ball Z, where pretty much every technique after the original Dragon Ball is essentially just a blast of energy with different arm gestures. Like I said, the outcomes of stand battles usually come down to who's more clever, or who has a better stand for the current situation, as opposed to how badly somebody wants to win, or how big of a dickhead one character finds another one to be. I mean, sometimes JoJo characters realize they're capable of new abilities when they're under pressure, or they gain them through very specific means, but it's never a case of,
haha, I really want to win, whereas you only kinda want to win, so now I'm gonna be an even bigger dick than you initially thought.
wait, you're gonna do even more things that I don't like than I initially thought? Well, now that I know that you're more than just kind of a dick, I really, really want to win.
What's this? You really want to win? I only thought you kind of wanted to win!
It's abundantly clear in JoJo that every character wants to win every fight as bad as humanly possible, and if they're backed into a corner, the absolute only way they're ever gonna get out of it alive is if they think of a solution to turn the tables rather than just being motivated by anger, and in my opinion, this makes fights way more interesting, especially when literally any character can die at any time. And look, I know there's tons of other shonen anime and manga that have unique battles based on abilities and aren't just energy blasts with different arm gestures, but since training makes no difference in JoJo, I think it's a little more interesting here than something like Hunter x Hunter, where most battles are won with strategy, but ultimately, dedicating your life to training will still give characters the advantage. And thanks to the ever-changing cast, not only do characters never become predictable, but neither do stand battles either. Pretty much any cool strategy a stand can implement's done once or twice, and then after all the possibilities are exhausted, the series moves on to brand new characters, which keeps all the battles unpredictable in every part. And even beyond the combat, all the characters have their own stories that go from point A to point B in a timely manner within their parts to the point where you're always left wanting more. Again, sometimes characters do return in later parts, but their motivations and goals are never the same because they've either already accomplished or failed whatever they were trying in the previous parts. So the only reason anyone ever returns is if they could offer something different to the plot rather than just being there for familiarity or nostalgia. But not only does completely changing the cast and plot in every part keep things fresh, but it also makes it a lot less intimidating for newcomers to get into. Whenever I'm trying to think of a new anime to get into, I typically find ones with more than 100 episodes like Naruto to be a little bit too daunting, which is why I'm not going to make any comparisons in this video to that series. But the length of JoJo's anime was yet another reason why I was never really in a hurry to get into the series. However, what I wish I had known before is that none of the individual parts in JoJo are really all that long. I mean, you could easily watch one part at a time, have everything wrapped up into a bow, take a break, and then come back to the series later on. The first part kinda had a little bit of a cliffhanger in the end, but the first two parts are by far the most connected in the entire series. But even those two parts combined are still shorter than any other part anyway, and then after that, all the parts become a lot more self-contained. And no matter how attached you become to one part, the rest of the series still has that same familiarity while always staying fresh at the same time. But while this means that someone could nonchalantly join their friend starting a new part in the middle of the series, you should still obviously never skip parts, since there's always at least a thread of connection to the previous parts. But going back to stands for a second, I know that they sound kind of like a ripoff of Personas if you're familiar with those games, but even though JoJo's anime started back in 2012, the manga actually dates all the way back to 1987, and it's still ongoing to this day, so Persona was actually inspired by JoJo, just like a lot of other video games and anime were. And because JoJo's mangas have been around for so long, it means that the anime doesn't have to create useless filler episodes to buy time for the source material to catch up, which means that what you see in the anime is about 98% accurate with the manga. So if you're gonna watch JoJo, everything you see is important, rather than seeing Piccolo get his driver's license for some reason, although if I'm being honest, I've always had a little bit of a soft spot for that episode. But you know, I could easily go on and on about why I love JoJo and why you should watch or read it if you haven't already. I mean, I didn't even get to talking about how friggin' awesome the openings are. But if I don't stop myself right now, then I'm probably going to be here for like 5 to 10 more minutes, and I don't really want to edit that much right now if I'm being honest. And look, don't get me wrong, just because I kind of buried Dragon Ball a little bit in this video doesn't mean that I hate that series by any means. In fact, I'd honestly say that I probably love it a lot more than most people who are going to get mad in the comments. The main reason I focused on comparing JoJo to Dragon Ball is because both have been around for about the same amount of time, with one being far more popular than the other, and since I'm one of the many people who got hooked to Dragon Ball to the point where I'll consume any new chapters and episodes they throw at me, regardless of whether or not I even think they're any good, I can feel confident in saying that if you like Dragon Ball, then you're probably gonna love JoJo as well. So if you're a fan of Dragon Ball, or really any other shonen anime in general, and have no idea what to watch next, then I strongly urge you check JoJo's Bizarre Adventure out if you haven't already, because I honestly think that the only way you could hate this show is if you're trying to. But if you really insist that you don't like it though, then at least make sure you make it past the first part, which is only 9 episodes long, or even just 90 minutes if you watch the condensed mini-movie for it. Because everyone who's told me they don't really care for JoJo's literally only watched the first 3 episodes like I did, and while I did still enjoy that part, it definitely wasn't until part 2 that I got hooked. But anyway, regardless of whether or not you've seen or read it, what do you think about JoJo's Bizarre Adventure? Vote in the poll, let me know what you think in the comments below, and as always, I'll try my goddamnedest to respond to everybody. But let me tell you, if there's 2 people who'd make great JoJo characters, then it'd definitely be today's patrons of the day, John Polish Impossible to Say and the Vidya Bros. If you want to be badasses like these 2, then consider supporting FU Game Crew on Patreon for loot boxes and all kinds of wacky rewards in the mail. And if you want to make cameos, then send pictures or videos of you rocking any FU Game Crew merch doing whatever you want as long as YouTube allows it, like these badasses you see before you. And as always, like and share this video if you want to help this channel grow, and if you want to prove that you're not down with registered sex offenders, then go right ahead and press that subscribe button if you haven't already. Also, I'm going to be streaming on Twitch at Cameron All One Word whenever I play games from now on, so feel free to come hang out and heckle me sometime. My name's Cameron All One Word, and I'll be back with more videos soon.
So I want to say thank you to your loyalty, thank you for your support.